Hi guys, this is Jake at Canadian Cutting Edge. Thanks for joining me. Today we're taking a look at another Ganzo knife. This is the G742. It comes in green G10 or orange or black. And it comes in black with the stripes that go vertically down, sort of that 3D kind of shape. And you can also get it with a wooden handle scale as well. A frame lock knife that you might be familiar with Ganzo's frame locks that I like very, very much. They are very underpriced for what you get. And it's a knife that I find to be one of the EDCs of choice. It's just got everything about it says, this is a working knife it's ready for doing a task. It does look good, but it's not about its looks. It's really about, being prepared to handle whatever comes its way. And that's the kind of knife I think it is. And I'd like to share the positives about it. And if I notice anything negative about it, I'll tell you about that as well. You won't know unless you stick around and watch the full review. I mentioned in the introduction that this is a knife that I call a very good EDC knife. And I call it that for a couple of reasons. One, it's got a great cutting edge. And the second main reason is it's got a very good handle for doing harder tasks. And that is because it's got this little tail, and at the front of the handle you've also got this nice big choil. So when your hand is in this knife, it is secure. It's not going to fall out of the hand easily because you've got this nice end at the tail end. And at the front end, you've got that big choil. The knife will just sort of stay in the hand even if you start doing hard work. And even if your hand gets wet or the knife gets wet, you get a good hold of this knife and you're not going to drop it by accident unless something goes terribly wrong. And that can happen with any knife at any time anyway, so you just try to mitigate that as best you can for every cutting instance. But just the simple shape of this handle is one that lends itself to hard use and quite a lot of safety when you're doing that hard use. You've got a nice lanyard hole here at the end so that you can use a system where that, you can wrap that around your wrist or however you want to use a lanyard. And that'll take even 1100 paracord. That hole is big enough for that. Just barely, but 550 is no problem getting through there. You've got a tip-up pocket clip, and the pocket clip is right or left. You've got a little over half of an inch of the knife sticking out of your pocket when you're using this pocket clip because of where they position the holes for it. And you've got your nice stainless steel stone-washed frame lock side, and then your show side is either G10 or wood. The G10 texture here is the texture that's very typical for Ganzo, that small sort of checker pattern. I'll give you a close-up of that in some of the still shots, but it's a good, nice pattern that gives you an extra bit of grip in the hand, especially if you're right-handed, because your fingertips get on that texture. If you're left-handed, your fingers can wrap around the pocket clip if you've left it in the right hand position. If you've moved the pocket clip to the left hand position, then this side gets a little bit smooth in the left hand. I typically carry my knife on my right, even though I am left-handed. I'm quite ambidextrous, and I just have the left side for some other things because I can easily take my knife out with my right hand and do what I need to do with my right hand. It's just if I'm going to be cutting for a long time, I often switch to my left. And I switch back and forth, whatever works best for that particular task. Let's talk about some of the specs here, and then we'll get in on more of the details of what I like or dislike about this knife. 440C stainless steel, which is typical for Ganzo. Not all of their knives have it, but most of them. This knife came out a couple years ago. We've got a nice drop point, great big belly, almost 2 inches of a flat area back here, a nice sharpener's choil, high saber grind. This grind comes up 2 centimeters, about 3/4 of an inch. It's essentially as good as a full flat grind because of how it is, and yet you've got a nice flat area up top here, so if you've got a system that clamps onto the knife to sharpen it, you can do that with this knife relatively easily. It comes very thin to the point, and well, let me tell you the specs of the sizes and we'll get to that. The cutting edge is 3 3/8 of an inch, which is 8.5 centimeters. And then the thickness of the steel behind the grind, so right at the edge there where my fingernail is, on both sides, just when that final grind ends, how thick the steel is right there is quite thin. It's thinner than most of what Ganzo makes. This knife is 0.008 inches, which is 0.2 of a millimeter. 0.2 of a millimeter thick behind that final grind. And that makes this thing a super, super slicer. It just slices like nobody's business. It just does its work. I have not had any of these edges roll or chip or anything in all my EDC time with these knives. I've got these two. I've had 3 or 4 of them, and I've given a bunch of them away. This is one of my favorite knives to give away to somebody who's new to knives, because they will have a really good experience with this knife if this is one of their first knives, because of what I mentioned earlier in how safe it is in the hand and because of how great it cuts. So for those reasons together, it's a really good first knife for somebody that's being introduced into knife collecting. The thickness of the handle here is 0.4 of an inch, which is 1 centimeter. Not exactly, but very close to 1 centimeter, very close to 0.4 of an inch. So it's quite thin. A lot of people find that to be what they want. I tend to like them a little bit thicker, but this knife, just by the sheer size of it, you've got over an inch between the spine and the belly here, about 1.25 inches. That gives some of the extra size to it that you lose in the thickness, so it still feels really good in the hand. You have these 3D hourglass shaped studs for the open pillar construction, which is really nice. The weight of the knife, I'll just put it on the screen right here because I forgot to make notes of it and take it downstairs with me. So I'll put it on the screen, the weight of this knife. Somebody who has been a knife collector for a while, has been a knife collector for a while, if you've not experienced this knife, you're missing out on it, because this guy is not expensive, and yet it works really, really well. All 4 of them that I've had have 2 bronze washers in them. This one's got 2 phosphor bronze washers, and this one's got 2 phosphor bronze washers. I'm not sure if every single one that they've ever made has that, or if I just got the luck of a run of knives where these 742s got 2 phosphor bronze washers. I've not had that experience with any other Ganzo knife, to be honest with you. Most of them have 1 phosphor bronze and 1 white nylon washer. The action on the pivot is nice and smooth. I haven't adjusted either one of these. Lockup is right at about the 50% mark. And blade centering is very good, and I'll give you close-ups of that for both of them, or maybe just one of them. They're both very much the same on the blade centering. It's a really good blade, if you ask me. The thumb stud is far enough back that it doesn't get in the way of slicing. The jimping on the thumb riser here is gentle, and you'll see a close-up of that as well. And yet it's effective to give you a little bit extra grip with a thumb, but not so much that it's going to get hot on your thumb during longer use. The frame lock has a slight chamfering on the inside edge here to make it really easy to use your thumb to disengage the lock. Easy to do with one hand, no problem at all. Even with the left hand, I have no problem. It's just a really well-designed knife that's, easy to use. All Torx construction everywhere, even on this over travel stop that all of these have. And let me tell you again, the piece de resistance on these frame locks is the wire EDM technology that they use to cut out that lock arm. Look at that. It's a very, very thin cutout when they make these. Like very, very few companies do that to start with, let alone on a knife that's like 20 bucks or under 20 bucks. I've got some of these I got at $15 a piece, some of them at 18. It just depends on when they're having different sales and flash sales. You know, this is a really, really excellent knife for the price. It's worth at least 3 times as much any day of the week. And people who didn't know that this was a knife that's made in China by a Chinese company would easily pay quite a bit more for this than what the retail price is of it. And those people who are familiar with Ganzo realize that it's worth every penny. This knife just is such a big plus for me. I think I'd like to have every single one of them, but I just can't. I can't justify buying every single knife and having one of each of them in my collection. I've got 2 of these, and it's probably going to stay that way. I might give one of them away, to be totally honest with you, but it's a nice, nice knife. Do you want to see how it cuts? Of course you do. I don't really put much weight into cut tests. To me, a cut test just tells you how it's cutting today. It really doesn't tell you if the steel is really that good, because what do you know? Do you know if I just sharpened this and just dropped it and just made it perfect just before my test? You don't know. Am I being honest that I haven't sharpened it since I bought it and all I've done is stropped it a couple times? You've got no way of knowing. All you can do is take my word for it. And the same is true about every other reviewer as well. So it's 440C steel by Ganzo, which is, in my opinion, at the upper end of budget steels. So let's start with my Paracord test. So here's 4 layers of Paracord, and we're going to see how well this knife cuts through that. And it just cut through that, no problem at all. We've got some banding here. This is a 1-inch wide banding. The type of banding that you use for making a molly system or adjusting a molly system, whatever. Saw it cut through that. And then in the slice mode, cuts through that really well. It's not doing the best with a push test, but it's doing pretty good. Like I said earlier, this doesn't really mean anything to me because, you know, I could strop this a little bit and I could make it perform really, really well on camera, and you just wouldn't really know one way or the other what I did. My experience with Ganzo's 440C is that you can sharpen it up quite easily. It's not so soft that it's too easy. It's usually between 58 and 59 Rockwell hardness. You can strop it and bring back the edge after it's gotten a little bit of use to it. And it's a steel that performs very, very well. I'm very glad that Ganzo is using it. Thank you for subscribing and making comments. I really appreciate if you make comments in the comment section. It's my favorite thing about YouTube, especially on my own channel. I like interacting with you guys and you know, hearing what you have to say about knives, and you know, it's just my favorite thing to do. And if you're not yet a subscriber, please subscribe and then click that bell so you can be notified of every video. And thank you for liking and sharing. And most of all, remember to always cut towards your chum and not your thumb.